Hey, and this is the final game of your attempts to do the 52 worker $3,500 push at 10 minutes in TV everything. This is going to be a TVT. My concerns so far have always been that, first of all, you've usually missed your worker benchmarks, even though you've had so many workers that's totally fine. And you've never attacked on time. You've never attacked when you're supposed to. Also, you almost never have more than $2,200 of army at 10 minutes, which is really bad because that's the whole point of the build, is to get a $3,500 army and push while also having tons of workers. So you usually end up not fighting until 200 unit space, and a Marine Marauder, very low upgrade, very low tech unit, very low gas army is terrible at 200 unit space. It's a really strong 100 unit space push. It's a really weak 200 unit space push. So here comes a little siege tank push that has no possibility at all of doing any damage to you. You're going to rip it to shreds, empty the bunker, kill the tank. That's good. So that was kind of lucky for you that he did something so stupid. I wonder how far that put you behind on your macro. It looks like not far behind at all. That was good. You held that off without even falling behind. I would like to see your your factory. Okay, so right when this finishes, you want to see the starport and the reactor, and I doubt we're going to see that because you're busy. Reactor, factory, reactor, factory, reactor, factory, reactor, factory. And don't get this. Stop doing that. I mean, reactor, starport. Reactor, starport, reactor, starport. I'm not saying you shouldn't have stim. I'm saying that getting the 2 medevacs out to go with at exactly 10 minutes is really important, and you've missed the starport timing every single time. You have not once built that starport the second your factory finished. And the way that you can remind yourself to build the starport on time is to use the same SCV to make a factory, and then right-click him up here with your shift so that he just shows up in your idle workers thing, and you're like, oh, why do I have an idle worker? Oh, yeah, I was supposed to make a starport.
Add-on complete.
So I loved your defense, I loved what you had done up until 8 minutes, but your starport's going to be so late that I suspect you're not going to have any medevacs at 10 minutes, and obviously I'm right, because you don't even have a starport at 10 minutes, and I bet you're not going to attack at all until way too late, and then, so, again, this is, the whole point of the build is what you can get by 10 minutes, and I know that when you get attacked, it's really hard to hit the benchmarks that you wanted to hit, but you don't have a third or fourth gas. You only have 42 workers. You've got lots of undropped mules in your main command center, lots of undropped mules here. Your army size is 1750 with no completed upgrades. This is terrible. Like, look how far ahead you are of your opponent. Your income is massively bigger than your opponent. But having a massively bigger than your opponent income only matters if you're going for a really good late game composition, and you're not. You're going for a 10-minute timing attack with a huge income, and you're not making the attack at the right time. So the reason that we like pushing at 10 minutes is because at 10 minutes your opponent has no defense, right? He's got a tank there, 2 tanks here, and a marine there. If you have a $3,500 army and you would just move into him right now, he has a $1,375 army and he would die. A recent comment in one of your vids, we should do a dual cast of the Muslim build focusing on how to rather than what happened. I got that comment too. Sounds good. So again, you want 117. You have 80. You got thrown off by the attack, but you defended the attack really well, and it just kind of forced you to be a little bit behind on your starport, a little bit behind on your third gas, way behind on workers, and just the longer you go with this composition, the worse it's going to look, because he's just going to do this. He's going to siege up and kill you. So right now, this is the bane, this is the dread. This is what gives nightmares to anyone who goes Marine Marauder in TVT or TVP. is to see 3 Colossus with the 9 range upgrade, or 3 tanks or 4 tanks siege up in a place where you have a choke that's only this wide. You're done. If this ever happens to you, you can't get through that choke. Even though, look at his army, it's not very big. It's actually tiny. But I mean, your army is pretty tiny too. You're up 20 supply, and you have stim, and he doesn't. And you know, on paper you're doing okay. But this is over, man. All he has to do is hold position in these Marines, and you can't get to the tanks because you're gonna have to try to run around the bunkers and all that stuff. So you're going to pull workers too late as well. The point of pulling workers is to get his siege tanks to shoot the workers while your Marines and Marauders get to do unanswered damage, but you pulled the workers after the army, and so that's just going to die. It's going to die. Dead. So what you wanted to do, first, you never want to be in this position because this map has so many paths to get from your base to his that you should never be able to stop you with siege tanks unless they're sieged up at your natural. You never want to have someone siege up at your natural, and you want your army to be so huge. You want to have a bigger army than him. It's at 10 minutes. That's like the whole point of the build. It's a timing attack at 10 minutes. So you need to have vision far enough away that he can't get siege tanks up to you. If he sieges up right here, he wins the game. There are things you can do to do better in that situation, but in general, it's a losing position to be in. If he gets, especially if he'd gotten 6 siege tanks sieged up right here, because he's lost several siege tanks throughout the game earlier. But this position, we did this on the unit map tester. You have a bunch of M&M. He has some siege tanks and some Marines. He wins. No matter what you do, he wins. And we know that what makes you better is the ability to attack from multiple, like a bigger arc. Like if you could attack him from this angle and this angle, then he only gets to shoot siege tanks at one little tiny clump of that, and you're going to be able to win that fight. If you can... if you can delay him from pushing forward by just backing up and getting your own siege tanks down here, but you're not even you don't even have siege tanks coming, so that's not really an option. You have medevacs, so one thing you can do is load up a medevac and send it off to go do a drop on his main, but he's so bad at reinforcing that he's actually got enough back at home to deal with a drop. But what I would do in this situation, you've got the 2 bunkers, so you have time. These bunkers are going to die no matter what you do, so your goal is just to use them for what they're meant to be used for, buying time. Take your whole army, spread it out right here, spread out the rest of it here and right here. Hotkey your command center, and then hotkey your whole army and all of your SCVs. Rally your troops down here, and then just keep an eye on him. He's going to knock down these bunkers, and then he's going to try to move forward to be sieged up in range of your workers. As soon as you see his siege tanks moving forward, lift the command center with your hotkey, and then A-move with everything. Your SCVs are actually faster than your Marines and Marauders as long as you remember not to stim. The SCVs will pile in and absorb some siege tank shots, and the Marines and Marauders will start shooting at his Marines. And that's fine. You don't want to try to run past and get to the siege tanks. As your SCVs just get ripped to shreds by siege tank fire, they're going to be trying to melee his Marines, which means his own siege tanks are going to be killing his own Marines. Very shortly, everything in the front of his tanks will be dead. You continue not to micro your anything, and just A-move to here and just keep watching, and what will happen without you doing anything is that the final few living SCVs will get in range of the siege tanks, and then your Marines and Marauders will have basically spread out like this and started to get pwned. Right then is when you stim and grab small groups and move them up towards the top so that you can actually get an L-shaped surround rather than just the one-sided surround, and then he'll be dead. I don't know if even doing that would have won this fight for you. It probably would have, because this is enough SCVs, and you have a lot of Marines and Marauders, and most importantly, you have stim, which is really an important factor when pushing into these siege tanks. But no matter what, you're going to lose a crap ton of SCVs, and it's not going to be pretty. So getting into this situation in the first place is very bad. It's game-endingly bad. You will always lose a fight trying to knock down this sort of contain. And in order to prevent it, you just wanted to keep these watchtowers and see him coming. But I know that the Filter StarCraft videos that you're basing your play off of said not to scout, so I don't know what to tell you about that. He is absolutely correct that you don't need to scout if you're doing a 10-minute push, because any push that comes before 10 minutes is only going to have 2 tanks in it. So you should be able to beat that just by stimming in your infantry and doing what you did before, which actually worked to beat his first push. But to go all the way to 12 minutes without having attacked him, you're going to end up facing this sort of nonsense and just be crushed by his overwhelming number of siege tanks. So you notice that the way you engaged here, your bunkers worked against you. Only one of these Marines can shoot at a time. The rest of your Marines are just kind of sitting behind the bunker. And right here, you can only keep about 3 infantry shooting at a time. The rest of them are just sitting behind there. So that's why I would say back up, wait for the bunkers to fall, wait till you have a much cleaner, land to run through. Really emphasize getting siege tanks out with siege mode as quick as you can, and see if he lets you just sit back and chillax. Because if he doesn't even try to move into range of your command center, you could go another 2 minutes with a massively greater income than him and a massively greater production than him. And the longer you delay, when you fast expanded and he's doing an aggressive tank push, the longer you delay before the fight, the bigger your army is going to be relative to his army, because you should have a bigger income than him, you should have a bigger production than him. And if you can't engage well before he sieges up, the next best thing is to just try to delay as long as you possibly can. Yeah. So don't feel too bad about losing this. Once he sieged up here, there was almost nothing you can do, and you were told not to scout. So the only way you could have prevented him getting here in the first place would have been to have seen him coming, which you can only do by scouting, which is against the rules, so it's totally fine. You lost this game. Just like when you lost the 4-gate, this is the type of game you're supposed to lose when you do what you did. But if you'd pushed it 10 minutes, I think you would have won. And that's what the build was meant to do. Like, not if you'd pushed with what you actually had, but if you'd pushed with what you were supposed to have. Because Mr. Blue, Mr. Hammerhead, did a 1-base build, and he did it reasonably well, but he only had 2,600, including siege mode, at 10 minutes. So if you'd had the 3,500 that you're supposed to have, you would have had $1,000 bigger army than him. You would have only had 2 tanks, and especially if you'd gone around here so that you weren't running into pre-siege tanks, you could have definitely gotten down to his base and probably won the game. But c'est la vie. Why talk about what would have been? So the only point I'm making there is that it's not that you did a bad build, it's that you did the build poorly. So it's not like you shouldn't have been able to win this game doing that build. It's just that if you'd actually done the build the way it was meant to do, you would have had a much bigger army. I'm just trying not to crap on the concept that you went into the game with. It was a good concept, and you didn't lose the game because it was a bad concept. You lost the game because you didn't do it. You didn't do it. So yeah, that's all the games. Recommendations is spend a lot of time in the unit tester getting to know what Marine Marauder is good at, and really familiarize yourself with how completely wasteful of your time it is to even try to run into 5 siege tanks or 10 siege tanks or 4 Colossus without a whole bunch of tech units to take care of that crap for you, like siege tanks of your own, Vikings for Colossus, stuff like that. And just keep doing this build, but try to do it right, man. Try to do it so that when you watch the replay and you look at how big your army is at 10 minutes, it should say 3,500. You should always have that much army. And every time you play a game where you don't have that much army, you didn't do the build. So a timing push is based on whether or not you did the build perfectly. In a timing push, you have to do it perfectly. My TVP, the Stamumuma push, that's a timing push. It has to be done perfectly or else you lose. Whereas my TVZ is a macro game, and my TVT is also a macro game, where you just constantly add income and add troops, and it doesn't matter if you do it perfectly, because your goal is just to continually have a larger income and spend it eventually. So those are two different styles of plays, and you're kind of mixing them together, and you can't mix them together. You have to do one or the other. It has to be a timing push or it has to be macro style. I would actually even recommend, maybe after you've tried this enough times that you're frustrated with it, maybe stop trying to do a timing push and instead do a macro style, which means do the same exact build but add a third base at 11 minutes and add 4 gas slightly earlier, and add 2 more factories and add another starport and add more racks, and then add a 4th base at like 16 minutes and add a 5th base at like 20 minutes, and so on and so forth. And just really keep expanding and keep making more production infrastructure and so on and so forth. And really try to get a better long-term unit composition, right? Because the build you're doing has a horrible unit composition for the late game and a great unit composition for the early game, but you're doing a late game, you're playing it out like late game, and so you're running into the problem that, you know, in the late game that composition sucks. So yeah, I'm gonna wait till you've seen these and ask some questions. Maybe we'll discuss what builds might be better for you and stuff like that. For now, I'm not just gonna pick a build out of a hat and say do this instead. I think the build you're trying to do is an excellent build, and if you can do it right, I think you'll win all of your games. So I don't want to steer you down a different path when you don't really need to stop doing what you're doing. You just need to do it better. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.